So in my recent video about heavy metal, like the history, the past, present, and future of metal music, I was talking a lot about how I personally feel metal has been in decline lately in some ways. And to underscore this, I actually took it upon myself to try to figure out when was like the last seminal album in metal actually released. Now, the criteria I was using for seminal albums is basically like something that is by a band that is considered fairly popular within the metal community. Now, this does not mean popular among the mainstream, like among normies, but popular among metalheads in a broad sense. Um, it has to be well known within the metal community. So that's the first criteria. The second criteria I was looking for was basically an album that is highly regarded, that has high user ratings on average. I did not look into critical ratings at all, like because I don't think those matter that much. I think user ratings are more important rather than critics. So yeah. Um, the way I calculated this was I looked at because album sales, like nobody actually buys albums these days. So what I did was I looked at the number of subscribers on Spotify, like or no, sorry, the number of listens on Spotify, like monthly listens for a particular band. And then I looked at the average user score for these albums on three different websites: Sputnik Music, Rate Your Music, and Album of the Year. And I used a bit different threshold criteria because the ratings on some of these websites tend to be just like higher or lower on average. Like for Sputnik, I used the threshold of 4 out of 5. But for Rate Your Music, I actually used the threshold of 3.75 out of 5. The reason being that for some reason, people on Rate Your Music tend to have stricter ratings for whatever reason. They tend to rate things a bit lower on average. Like you can see this if you look at like top albums of all time for both websites and what ratings they have. For Album of the Year, I'm less familiar with that site than the other two, but I use the threshold of 80%. So that yeah, they have a different rating system. Both Sputnik Music and Rate Your Music have a 0 to 5 scale, but Album of the Year has a percentage scale, so 0 to 100. So for that, I made the threshold 80%. So, um, on Spotify, my threshold was 1 million listens in the past month, but for all of these, I was willing to count something if it's slightly lower, if it comes close to meeting the threshold for all these things, but slightly falls short, maybe in like one of them. But it should at least come close to meeting all of these. But if let's say it almost does, but it falls short on one website or whatever, or it's slightly under 1 million on Spotify, I'd be like, okay, fine. Um, Judging by these metrics, were there any metal albums since 2010 that actually meet all these criteria? Um, the closest there were two that met the criteria and one that came very close. The one that came very close is I think it's called Meliora by Ghost. I've never really listened to Ghost, but yeah, this came out in 2015. And I guess most people consider Ghost to be a metal band. I've heard some say no, they're actually hard rock, but it's like whatever, close enough. It met all the criteria except on Rate Your Music, it fell a little bit short of 3.75. Um, and the two that do meet all the criteria were earlier, two albums by Deftones, Diamond Eyes in 2010 and Koino Yokon in 2012. And these meet all the criteria. Now, granted, the other issue is, again, there's metal elitism, so some people would say that none of these are actually metal albums. So the most recent album that meets all these criteria that virtually everyone would consider metal, even metal elitists, would be probably Crack the Sky by Mastodon, which passes with flying colors. And it came out in 2009. So there you go. I mean, and the thing is, if you were looking at the 70s, 80s, 90s, or 2000s, there would be in each of these decades, well, for the 70s, there'd probably be about 13 albums that would pass these criteria. In the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, each decade, there might be over 20. There might be well over 20. Like some of these decades, there could even be over 30. But definitely over 20. They're in probably all three of these decades. There'd be so many albums that would meet all these criteria easily in the 70s and especially 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Now, granted, you could say this is flawed because it doesn't take into account more obscure bands, and I agree. There are some more obscure bands that have been really good, like say Neobliviscaris or Alcest. Those are bands predominant in the 2010s that definitely pass the minimum user ratings threshold, but just don't pass the Spotify listens threshold. But what I'm trying to say is this, like, there aren't as many big metal bands as there used to that are still making like really, really good music, like stuff that's like classic or innovative or will be seen that way one day, and that are like universally regarded as like big names in the metal community. Like that kind of thing is going downhill. I'd say even like there's some more obscure bands that are still putting out widely acclaimed albums, but there's still probably even fewer of those compared to like the 90s or 2000s. Like in the 2010s, there'd be like, and 2020s, there'd be like Alcest, Deafheaven, Neobliviscaris, Ulcerate. I think that Every Time I Die, they had an album that was really popular a few years ago. Yeah, so there'd be a few, and like Deftones, as I said, Ghost. But like, and like there's some that come close, like in terms of the user, like say Mastodon, Gojira, Judas Priest, all had albums that kind of Meshuggah that come close to this threshold of high user ratings, but just don't quite get there, or in some cases do, yeah. But well, I think like Ghost did, as I said, with that one album. But like, my point is, okay, like there's obviously not as many albums coming out that would be considered classics or even potential classics one day, simply because either A, they're just not widely regarded enough, or B, they're just not getting enough exposure. And another one would for the 2010s would be Between the Buried and Me, but yet again, not quite as popular, not quite meeting that threshold of being well known and widely listened to the same extent as these earlier bands. So that's what I'm trying to say. And I also think, as I said in my previous video, I think metal does need to innovate more, and part of the way to do that is stepping outside of metal into the realm of electronic music, like purely electronic music, but electronic music that is metal infused and metal inspired. As I said, kind of like the new model by Perturbator, but with metal style vocals. Like that's the kind of thing, if they want to be innovative, if they want to make new classics, that's what they should be doing. But yeah, my point is basically, like looking at it through this objective method, yes, metal is in the decline from this perspective. Like there simply aren't albums coming out anywhere near as frequently that are considered very like highly renowned and are also very popular among the metal community. Never even mind among the mainstream, because again, like in this 70s, 80s, and 90s, there was some stuff, even the 2000s, that was not only popular among metalheads, but even in the mainstream to an extent. And now it's just like we're not seeing that hardly at all. Like even we're not even seeing that level of popularity among metalheads, or that level of like something being considered classic, being considered both popular and acclaimed, like high quality, something that is just respected for its quality. Like something like Sleep Token, for instance, is quite popular, but it's just not as well respected when you look at the average user ratings. But yeah, it's just we're not seeing that as much anymore. And I do think in that sense, yes, metal is in it's not dead, but it's kind of on life support. But there's still good stuff coming out. I'm just saying, and a lot of it is from older bands, so that's kind of the concern. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that.